How's it going, everyone? Nick Templin here from Templin Scouting, and today we are going to be looking at the New York Rangers. So the Rangers were the highest seeded team to not make the playoffs this season. In fact, they were such a high seed that they actually finished higher than the Montreal Canadiens in the regular season. However, due to the way the league was running this year with the North Division and the Metropolitan, or was that what it was this year? Or just the East Division, I think it was called, being completely separate and just taking the top four teams from both. So I mean, there's a lot to like about this Rangers team going forward. They've got a lot of young talent, definitely some players that you'll want to look out for going forward, and of course they got the great offensive leadership from guys like Zibanejad and Panarin, and then obviously they had a Norris level season from Adam Fox, who in fact did win the Norris. They've got a guy here who is probably their best defenseman that this franchise has had since Brian Leetch. So I mean, they're going to want to do everything they can to try and build around him for the time being. So before we begin, I just want to point out the one trade that I did make previously involving the New York Rangers was sending Chris Tierney here from the Ottawa Senators for a third-round pick. I think it's a solid move for the Rangers. Gives them a guy that they can play in their bottom six, solid center, and also because I have Colin Blackwell ending up with Seattle as part of the expansion draft. So I'm just going to go ahead and make that move. If you haven't seen my Seattle expansion draft video yet, I just posted that yesterday at the time that I'm recording this right now. I'm hoping to also have this one out today, but we'll see how that goes. Definitely go check out that video if you haven't already. We made some pretty interesting decisions, and I honestly really like the roster that we came up with for the Seattle Kraken. Alright, so looking at the team right now, obviously there's a few obvious players missing here. So we're going to go ahead and take a look at first of all, the unrestricted free agents that we have to sign, or that we could be signing. And you look at this, and Di Giuseppe, they could bring him back. Not a big deal if they don't. Jack Johnson, they're probably just happy to get rid of him. And Brendan Smith, who is a contract that they've been needing to get rid of for a long time. They finally get to. Not a bad player by any means. They could definitely decide to re-sign him if they wanted to. But it also isn't a bad idea for them to just move on there. So looking at the restricted free agents they have to sign, which will be much more interesting, starting with Pavel Buchnevich, who is really good. He's been an awesome first-line forward for them to kind of fill out that line with Panarin and Zibanejad. They're definitely going to bring him back. He is going to likely make significantly more than he did previously, so I think somewhere in the $5.5 million range is pretty fair for Pavel Buchnevich. You could see him even getting as high as $6 million, but I think for now, going with a 4-year, $5.5 million deal is beneficial to both sides. So, gotta add another 0 there. And there we go. So Buchnevich back with the team. There you go. First line right winger. Boom, you got your first line set. Next, we're going to take a look at Philip Hedl. And yes, it is pronounced Hedl. I know it's a pretty strange one, but for the longest time, I was trying to figure out how to pronounce his name, and I just had no idea until I finally heard Hedl, and I realized that's actually the correct pronunciation, which I think is really funny. But personally, I don't know the Czech language super well, so I'm sure anyone who does would understand or be able to explain to me why it is that it's pronounced that way. Anyways, I'm going off on a tangent there. You know what? He could probably make more than $1 million this year because he did have a pretty solid season this year. Probably $2 million isn't a bad range for him. One more 0 there. going for, 3 seasons on $2 million. I think that's a pretty good deal. He might be able to get quite a bit more, to be honest. But I think just for the sake of my best estimate, I think this is what they could be looking at. So bringing in Philip Hedl gives them somebody else who can play in their bottom 6. He's a pretty solid center. He can play the wing. So overall, yeah, it's a guy they're definitely going to want to bring back. Looking at some of the other guys here, I do think they'll probably sign Julien Gauthier. I'm not sure that he makes the lineup this season, but I will go ahead and sign him back here. So, something in the, pretty similar to what he had. Let's give him exactly what he had before, just because I don't think he's increased or decreased in value, really. And then just give him a 1-year deal. Kind of prove it, see if you can stay in the NHL kind of thing. For now, we'll just put him in the scratches. We'll move him up if need be. Libor Hajek is a guy that I'm sure they're going to want to bring back. He was actually one of the pieces of the what they got back from Tampa, I believe, in the Ryan McDonough and JT Miller trade. I could be wrong about that, but I do believe that he came over from Tampa. And he's only 23, definitely still has room to grow. Obviously not an offensive presence, but he is a pretty solid defensive guy. So definitely worth bringing him back on, probably less than $1 million, to be honest. He, unless there's some analytics there that I'm missing on him that I don't know about, and if there is, please let me know, because I'm always looking to learn more about players in their analytical, their analytical side, because I do love analytics. I just don't take the time to always look at them as often as I would like to. Looking at Brett Howden, that's questionable whether or not they would bring him back, to be honest. I think they will. He's a good age. He could potentially be a trade piece, but overall, you know what? We will sign him for now. We will sign him to like $950. One more zero, I believe. For 2 years. But I think we might potentially use him as a trade piece. Because I haven't figured out what I want to do yet, but I do think that this is a team that is going to try and make a pretty big splash here in the offseason. So we will see. Obviously, there's some other guys here that I do think will get signed. I think Gettinger is a guy that they will sign and put back in the minors. Adam Huska will definitely get re-signed. I think he's a pretty solid third goalie option. Well, so is Kincaid, obviously, but Huska is, more good goalie depth that they could have, but again, not going to be in the NHL, so I'm just going to leave that for this video. Ty Ronning is a pretty solid AHL player. I'm sure they'll at least try to bring him back. Don't know much about Igor Rykov. That's a guy I'd have to look into a little bit more. Guys like Gabriel Fontaine, they'll probably bring back. Don't know enough about Crawley either, but I do think that he's probably, I don't know. I don't see them really letting any of these guys go. Maybe Crawley. I don't know enough about him. Igor Shesterkin, that's the big one here. So that's their franchise goalie to replace Henrik Lundqvist. Big shoes to fill, but he's already he's off to a pretty good start. He's looked really solid at the start of his career here. So we are going to try and figure out a contract for him. He'll probably get somewhere in the $6.5 to $7 million range, I would guess. Let me just check my zeros on that. Yep, we're good. And then they'll try and get him up long term. So 5 years, $6.5 million for Igor Shesterkin. All right. Well, that doesn't give us a lot of cap space to work with, I will admit. It's not super ideal. They might be able to try and do something with Tony DeAngelo, potentially to get rid of him. Another guy that I'm just going to go ahead and put right up in the NHL right now is Nils Lundqvist. I'd be very shocked if he isn't there by this time next year. He's just a really, really good offensive defenseman who showed a ton of skill over in Sweden. So I think the Rangers can be really excited about him being there very soon. I wonder about Jacob Trouba as potentially a guy that they would want to move, but it might be hard with a no movement clause on him. He would have to okay any trades that they would potentially make, or I don't know the specifics of his no movement clause. It might have some certain teams already on it that he's okay with, or he might have to present that at the time that they ask him if he'd be interested in a trade. Anyways, I think we'll leave him for now. I also think it's not a great contract for a lot of teams to try and acquire. I don't think Trouba is bad by any means, but $8 million is really steep for him. I think that, ideally he'd be somewhere in the $5 million to $6 million kind of range. But they do have a lot of guys still on their entry-level deals like Fox and Condre Miller and Zach Jones. So they don't have to worry about that too much at the moment. They do have to re-sign Fox next season, though, and that is something to think about when looking at their offseason this year. They probably aren't going to want to take on a whole lot more salary because they know they're going to have to hand out a pretty hefty contract to Adam Fox. So I think that's where a potential Anthony DeAngelo move comes in. And I think kind of what they're going to have to do is they're going to have to also give up a prospect or draft capital kind of to make this happen. And so we're going to take a look at a team that could potentially do that for them. Now, honestly, I think that some of the best options for a move like this would potentially be on teams that I've already done videos on. So I probably won't usually do this, but I think I might go back and use a team that I've already done a video on. And because Tony DeAngelo is a player that probably won't end up playing for whatever team he ends up on, I don't think it'll matter too much in the long run. It shouldn't affect any of the lineups that I've already gone through. But let's take a look here at some of the teams with some cap freedom. And he's only on a one-year deal too. So when you think of it that way, that does open some cap space up, even if they do have to hold on to him. But let's just take a look at some of the teams that could potentially take on this contract for them. And I think Columbus is one of those teams that would be able to. So what we're going to do here is we're going to send a 2022 second along with Anthony DeAngelo and try to acquire probably just an outside the box roster player, or a guy who's just kind of on the outside looking in at potentially making a roster. Probably doesn't have a great chance. It's hard to say here. Could be. Let's go with. Could go with Nathan Gerby. Could go with, and the other option too is we could just go with a later round draft pick. So we'll go ahead and just have them acquiring a 4th round pick here. So trading Anthony DeAngelo and a 2nd round pick for a 4th round pick from Columbus. Now some people might be a little upset by this deal. Obviously, there's a lot of controversy surrounding Anthony DeAngelo that I don't really want to get into on this channel. I know what my thoughts are on Anthony DeAngelo as a player and as a person. And, I don't want to spew anything, controversial. I think my views on him are kind of where the majority of people view him, and that's that he's not a very good teammate. Regardless of what you think of his political views are, he does kind of take these things in the locker room a step too far. He has a history of racism from back in his OHL days, which a lot of people just try and let it slide because they say, oh, he was 16 or he was 18 or however old he was at that time. Doesn't matter. Old enough to know better. But yeah, I don't want to get into that too much. I don't think he's a terrible player. I think when he played, He definitely had offensive skill. There's no denying that. But did he have defensive skill? Not really. Was he hurting his team defensively more than he was helping offensively? Yeah, I would say so. And the contract he's on overall doesn't help. So, I mean, you can say that he was taken out of the league because of his political views all you want. Truth is, he tried to fight his goalie after losing a game. Obviously, you never want that, especially not from a defenseman whose job it is to protect your goalie rather than, turn the blame around on the goalie themselves. Overall, he's not a guy that anyone in the NHL wants. I'm 100% sure about that. Like, there's not a single general manager in the league or a single coach in the league, I should say, that says that's a guy I want on my team. So why does Columbus do that? Well, they get a second-round pick to take on his contract. I think that's a really, it's a good deal for Columbus. If they want to release him, they can do it. If they want to, buy him out, they can do it. It's only 1 year, though. And then, just tell him, we don't actually want anything to do with you. You're not going to play for our organization, that kind of thing. But, thanks for the second-round pick, basically, is what they can say to him. So, anyways, going to move on from that one. That one opens up a little bit of cap space for any potential moves that I might want to make here. Other reason why they kind of need to look at their cap space situation here, too, is that they've got Mika Zibanejad coming off the books next season, and they'll have to give him a new contract. So, with all those things in mind, they might actually be kind of forced to look into a Trouba deal. So I think we are going to explore that option. It's going to be tough to make a deal like that happen. I think, especially because I think they would have to try and make that deal with a contending team. I think they will have to retain salary to make this work too. So we will take a look through. There are teams like Pittsburgh, who I like as a potential, location for Trouba. Florida, not so much. They seem to really like their analytics, and I don't think they like Trouba so much. Looking at, there's Boston. We already have them getting Seth Jones. Don't think they'd make this move as well. Not really. The Islanders. Looking at the West, they could look at Washington, but I think they wouldn't want to trade within their own division if they don't have to. I don't think he would want to go back to Winnipeg. I think that would be outside the question, or outside of consideration completely. Tough one here to find a potential landing spot for Jacob Trouba. Edmonton Oilers, maybe. I could see it with retained salary, but Colorado, no. Really tough to figure that out. Nashville's a decent spot. Let's look at Nashville because so far I do have them losing Ekholm. I have them pretty much retooling their offense as well with a Duchesne trade, and I'm probably going to have some more trades involved in the future with them, with guys like trying to get rid of Ryan Johansson's contract, which will be similarly difficult to what I'm trying to do right now. But looking at some of the players they could potentially acquire in a Jacob Trouba trade. So let me just go ahead, and I think we'll do about 25% retained salary. So we'll do $2 million off the cap here. I think I need one more zero. Yeah, I do. All right, taking $2 million off, so he'll be sitting at around a $6 million contract following the trade. And who do they get in return? Well, I think they can get some somewhat decent value here. I think you look at, potentially they do have some decent young players in their system. Can look at, let's see. Alexander Carrier, maybe? He's a guy who did play, 25 games last season in the NHL. Yeah, I think he's a potential good option for them to grab here. Looking at these other guys, they could look at what about could look at Luke Evangelista. I like that. He's a solid defensive forward prospect. And then just grab a 3rd round pick. Yeah, I think no, maybe we could get a 2nd. It's not and like for retaining the salary, I think you could definitely get a 2nd round pick here. So that's the deal. So I mean, you kind of look at it this way: they dealt a 2nd round pick to get rid of Tony DeAngelo, but then they get another 2nd round pick anyways from a team that's probably going to be. I don't want to say they're going to be better than Nashville. We'll have to see. I think Nashville might be going through kind of a retool/rebuild process this summer, and the Rangers are definitely on the rise. So, but it doesn't matter. Either way, you're making salary cap moves necessary to make this team better. So, looking at the situation now, Carrier, I think, is a guy who could definitely play full-time for them in the NHL this upcoming season. You look at this whole core, it's really young, and I think that's something they can look forward to. We're going to take Evangelista, put him down in the minors. I think he'll still be in the OHL next season. Could be minors eligible, not entirely sure. But yeah, so looking at the lineup now, some of the things that they'll just want to switch around here. I'm pretty sure they're going to want Alexis Lafreniere playing on the 2nd line, even if that means playing either Kreider or himself on the right wing, despite them both being left wingers. And then looking at the bottom 6 here, I think Brett Howden's still a player I would like to potentially have them moving. So let's take a look at some of the teams that could be interested in him, or I think in this situation they'd be more inclined to make a player swap, or maybe just get a pick out of it. I don't think this would turn into anything too big. I think Toronto is a place that Brett Howden would actually be a good fit in, because they do really like their inexpensive kind of 3rd and 4th line forwards to fill out the depth that they don't really have all the time there. So just looking at some of the guys that could potentially come in return here, don't love the options here. Might be just a draft pick coming the other way. Dennis Malgin maybe could be decent. Looking at Pierre Engvall maybe. I don't know about that one. They probably don't want to bring in a player more expensive than who they're trading. Adam Brooks potentially. I think Toronto wants to see what they have with him. Joey Anderson only played a game for them last season, so who knows. Yeah, I think we'll go with... I saw something here that I liked. Yeah, Dennis Malgin, I think, will be the guy in return. I don't know if either team would have to throw in a draft pick or anything, but what I do know is that Malgin didn't play last season, but he is a guy that some teams do see offensive upside in. It might be too much of a risk for the Rangers to take on, so maybe they just go after. It's hard to get draft picks with Toronto though, because they almost have none to work with right now. So we might have to move on to a completely different team, honestly. All right, we'll just do what I was going to do then, and we'll go with Dennis Malgin, and then maybe just throw in a 7th round pick. Dennis Malgin in a 7th round pick for Brett Howden. Then they get to go ahead and sign Dennis Malgin from Toronto. and offer him, pretty much exactly what I was just offering to Howden to get him in there. Throw him on the 4th line there. And yeah, you're kind of looking at a pretty solid, I would say, looking team right there. I mean, they really do need guys like Kravtsov, Lafreniere, and Kakko to really break out for this team to make any sort of real noise. But I think this is the right time for them to do exactly that. I think, Kakko's going into his 3rd season. Kravtsov hasn't really played full seasons, I don't think, yet. But I think, he's at that point where he's been in North America now for, I think, 3 or 4 years. I think just 3 years. But, and he's looked, solid at the AHL level. And if you don't put too much responsibility on him right away, have him as a 3rd line forward, and playing him with a new coach and stuff, because obviously there's a lot to be said about the potential that David Quinn was kind of holding them back a little bit, the way that he wasn't really using his young players. And Lafreniere, I mean, he started out slow this past season. There's no denying that, but I think the whole season long we saw the flashes of how good we know he really is. I mean, people are labeling him as a bust way too early on. I think that's totally unfair. I think he's going to be definitely the best player still from that draft. And, he's going to come out next season, and I think he's going to put up somewhere between, 20 to 25 goals and, 40 to 50 assists. Kind of, you could see him become a 70-point player right away in his 2nd season if he is used right. So that's something to look out for sure. Looking at the defense, you've got, Lindgren and Fox. You got Condre Miller and Nils Lundqvist. You got Zachary Jones and Alexander Carrier. I think that overall this is a pretty solid defensive core. The one thing that I could see them doing, but that I won't necessarily look into too much right now, is them acquiring another top 4 defenseman to potentially play over Miller or Lundqvist. But I think it would be in their best interest to definitely use those 2 guys as much as possible to really try to develop them, because obviously this isn't a team that's looking at next season as a year where they want to, or everyone wants to win the Stanley Cup every single season, obviously, but they're not looking at next season as, oh my god, we have to win the cup. It's more of a, let's just take a step forward, let's make the playoffs, let's maybe win a couple of rounds, be a surprise team, and if we can do that, we can call this year a success. And I think if they continue to build this core and they continue to develop these players, the way that this lineup is set up right now, they're putting themselves in a really good situation for the long-term outlook of this franchise. So just going to go ahead and look down here and see if there's any players we want to call up here to be the extra forward. And I think Morgan Barron is the guy who's going to be the closest. I mean, they could go out and make a signing. Actually, I think there's one more move that I do potentially want to make here, because we could potentially see Kevin Rooney or Dennis Malgin end up being a scratch here. And so I'm just going to take a look at the unrestricted free agents here. Just kind of looking at mostly forwards, just going through. So I did think about Zach Hyman, and I do really like that fit here. I think it's tough, though, because you want to have Kakko and Kravtsov be in your top 9 for sure. You don't want to limit the use of either of these players, and because of that, it kind of makes it tough to find a spot for him, because obviously you would want him either in your top 6 or at the very least on your 3rd line, but that becomes kind of tricky, because obviously you don't want to move Kreider down to the 4th line. You don't want to move Lafreniere down. It just gets kind of crowded in there. So I do want to look at Barclay Goodrow, and this was actually a comment I got on the video, my video yesterday, asking when this video was going to be made, and they said they were really hoping Barclay Goodrow would potentially be a part of it. And personally, I think that that's a really good fit. I think that he's a guy who they don't have to worry about where he plays in the lineup, because I think he will willingly accept a potential fourth line role. He will be a full-time penalty killer. He's a guy with offensive skill as well, so they have injuries, they can just move him up. So let's go ahead and give him a bit of a pay raise, because he certainly earned it in his time with the Tampa Bay Lightning. So let's go with $2.5 million over 3 seasons, I would say would be fair for him. Alright, and then we're going to go ahead and take Malgin out of the lineup, make him a scratch. And then they got Barclay Goodrow down there as well. I think it just provides some nice depth for them. He's a guy who we've seen absolutely come alive in the playoffs. He scored that really great overtime winning goal, series winning goal with the Sharks not too long ago, when they beat the Vegas Golden Knights, which for Shark fans probably feels like a millennium ago. But yeah, so I think this is where I'm going to leave it at this point. Sorry to take one last shot there at Sharks fans. It's too easy and it's really fun. So taking a look at the lineup here, let me know what you guys think down below. Let me know what you guys think of my trades. I know I did make a few, and they might look a little bit silly on paper, but the reasoning behind them, I think it makes sense in every situation here. I think that Brett Howden is the only one where it's kind of a head scratcher potentially, where you're like, really, is that all they could get for him? I don't think that's all they could get for him, but I do think that not many teams would be knocking at the door for him. I don't think that he would be a guy that a lot of teams are after. I imagine Toronto would look at him as a guy kind of right off the bat that they could potentially bring in to be a nice third or fourth line center there who is really good at faceoffs and that kind of thing. And for the Rangers to get a guy like Dennis Malgin, who has definitely shown flashes of offensive upside in the past, I think it's a guy that they can bring in and not really worry too much if they lose the trade, because it's not like they're losing a huge piece in Brett Howden if they do go through with that. Obviously, the Trouba trade, some people might think they could get more for him. I don't know about that. The contract isn't great. Even though they're helping out with $2 million retained, it's still not great. So, and in Nashville's case, I do think that this is a trade that they like. It's a guy that they can bring in to play in the spot that Ekholm was playing, because I do assume that he will be traded. So anyways, yeah. Again, let me know what you think of all these moves. Do you agree with them? If not, definitely let me know in the comments down below. I love having these discussions with you guys. Yeah, and if you like this content, make sure you give it a like and subscribe if you want to see more of it in the future.